Alright guys, so I know it's been a little bit since we've done a little camera rumors little video, and especially since I'm kind of a Canon shooter, I've been really focused on the Canon EOS R5 and R6, but those have cooled down, of course, with the official announcement and release, so we can focus on some other brands until, of course, Canon decides to release something new, and then I'll get all excited again. I get it. Anyways, so let's spend a little bit of time today talking about the new Sony A7S III. Now, this camera has been on the radar, I think, for a lot of people, since there's been a bit of time since the A7S II has come out. A lot of Sony shooters, of course, have been wondering what Sony's answer was going to be to the Canon R5 and R6. And really looking at the rumored specs, it's really kind of a very different camera than either the R5 or R6. And in my opinion, this has become more of a very much video-centric camera, as well as something that is probably even a little more even studio-based. Not necessarily something that the standard shooter, YouTuber for instance, or even home user or hobbyist, or I'm not even sure, outside of someone who's doing this at the professional cinema level, really truly requires or understands necessarily the probably time investment or return that some of these features will possibly give you or may not give you, depending on where you and I are going to be exporting this or showcasing the footage actually on. So let's look at it here. So number one, and I know this one's going to get a whole bunch of people being like, what? Because this is what happened with the R6. With the Canon R6, all the specs were like, that's perfect. Video, we love it. It's great. What is going on with a 20 megapixel? And that was, I bought it because, again, the photo side of it wasn't ridiculously important. I do like the fact that I can use 20 megapixels to take a good size image, and it's plenty for me. A7S III, 12 megapixels. This is probably going to be ridiculously crazy good in low light, would be my guess. Only having 12 megapixels on that sensor is going to allow for a lot more light sensitivity, which is going to be great for a lot of people. And again, if this is really pushed out toward it being a video focused mirrorless camera, then I get it. Can it do photos? Yeah, 12 megapixels. And again, depending on your needs, that may be a lot. One of the biggest things that we see is that we get caught up a lot in specs versus what we possibly need. Is this a photographer's camera? No. Is this a videographer's camera? Yeah, I'd say so. Next one here, you'll see records full HD in 240, 4K 120, 10-bit 422, and 4K 120 FPS RAW over HDMI. So no internal RAW. So if you put this up against the R5, there's definitely some similarities. Now the one thing it has here is full HD 240 frames per second. Canon had pretty much all their specs in 4K or 8K. Not a lot that they showcase on the R5 in 1080. Now supposedly with an upcoming firmware upgrade, a lot of those 1080s, especially like 120, will become available. But this says right out of the gate, you're gonna get 240 frames per second. Now that's pretty awesome. 4K 120 FPS RAW over HDMI. So it is gonna require an external recorder for that, whereas something like the R5 would be able to do RAW internal. Now, the R6, for instance, can't do 4K 120 at all. It's only 1080 120 and no RAW, period. So this kind of fits in that nice spot. 600 megabits per second. So that's something that I think a lot of us are going to really appreciate. 600 megabytes are going to allow you and I to be able to do all kinds of editing to that footage without it having any kind of breakdown, hopefully. Base ISO of 160 for S-Log3. Maximum ISO is 409,600. Again, I think this is primarily because of that 12 megapixel sensor. Having that small megapixel is going to allow its ISO rating to be just massive. 16-bit raw output. 16-bit. We're going right into like huge cinema camera territory, which is awesome. And 15 stops of dynamic range. You're even looking at things like the Blackmagic cameras, which are cine cameras, pushing 14 stops, I believe. 14 stops? 15 stops of dynamic range. Again, That's awesome. The real question now is, what kind of cards are we going to need to be able to store that amount of data coming through with these? So my guess is it's going to need fast cards, a lot of storage, and really, is it going to add a lot to the processing side of the machine that's editing? That I don't know. Curious. World's highest EVF, 9.4 million. Yeah, that's high. So that's, hey, more is better, right? For this, that's going to be awesome. And here's the kicker, which is kind of curious, exciting at the same time, because I think this was one of the biggest issues with the Canon cameras, is because they were weather sealed. That was one of the concerns as to why they were having some of these overheating issues at certain time limits, because of course they couldn't get fans or any kind of venting that would open up the body to allow some air cooling. So new kind of passive noise-free cooling system, so it doesn't sound like they're necessarily going to be using a fan, with no overheating or recording limits. So they went probably looking at, here's our cooling system, what frame rates can we get that allow us to shoot within this? Really curious to see what's going on here. UHS-II card support, which is cool. Look-wise, comes up, says that it should look very similar to the A7R4. And finally, we are getting a full flippy screen, which all the vloggers out there are going to be crazy happy with. And not just vloggers, even photographers. It's so nice to be able to get that camera up or down or wherever you want and be able to flip that screen to where you need it, so you can actually see what the camera's seeing without you having to be up there or down there with it. So I really like flip out screens. I think they're really good. And it says it's going to be the same one that's used in the ZV-1, so that's cool. And shipments could start in mid-August. Now this rumor, which came out a little while ago, talks about the announcement in late July. So that has kind of been made official. As we can see here, Sony confirms rumor of the Sony A7S III will be announced on July 18th. This looks like this is going to be a big day for all ye Sony shooters, and or those that may not have a big investment in Canon or Nikon or anything like that, and are really just looking for the best video camera that doesn't necessarily shoot 8K, I guess. So I think if they price this right, there have been some rumors, I think, that put it kind of in between the R6 and R5 for pricing, and I think that would fit really nice. And again, if you are not highly or heavily like me invested in Canon, I think this camera would probably be a camera that would be very high on the list if it fits in your budget. I think it's going to be one of the best cameras out this summer for sure in regards to its capabilities. What do you guys think? Sony A7S III, worth the wait? Are you guys currently shooting Sony? Will you be moving to a camera like this? Have you shot previously with A7S II? Is that an upgrade path? Are you shooting on one of the other Sony Alphas? Or are you possibly looking at this instead of one of the new Canons? Which one of the two platforms now has kind of got your curiosity piqued? For me, I've already put my money down on the R6, so that's happening. It's done. I'm very happy with what is coming, because again, I do think this camera very much focused on it being a little more studio. We are so heavily based right now around wanting the most, having the best specs, etc., etc. And then a lot of us are like, yeah, so I put it up on YouTube. I'm like, cool. So YouTube's compression is going to destroy all that information. And you see all these guys on YouTube making videos with GoPros and cell phones, and they do very well with it. If you and I are making this for more of a corporate client, we're doing it for actual cinema, we are doing it for broadcast, then I think these specs are something that you and I are really going to be looking at. And I wonder, I really do, I wonder if a camera like this can possibly get any kind of like Netflix certification, because that would just open it up to a lot of independent filmmakers that would like to possibly get their stuff showcased on some of these online streaming services. Curious. Alright guys, I'm going to leave it there. Video got a little longer. I start yapping. But I wanted you guys to have my thoughts on what I'm thinking about with this new Sony A7S III. I think it's going to be a great camera. I really do. And I think it was smart, sort of, I'm not really sure, for Sony to kind of hold back on their rumors and the specs, because a lot of people have dropped, I think, their money already on the R6 and or the R5, when maybe this could have been a more viable option or something that they would have considered. But they're not gonna buy two necessarily, especially two different brands. They're way harder to color match in the future. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave you there. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Get on down there. Let's have a chat. All right, my friends, more videos coming up. Later.